All praise to Yahweh, in the name of his son, Yahweh Shai, in the name of the Holy Spirit. Double honors to my elders, apostles, and the bishops of Great Millstone, otherwise known as GMS, also known as the Prophets of Doom. These are where I have learned this truth, and these are where I am still learning this truth. And also shalom to the remnant and the elect of Israel. Lord willing, I am of that number. All right, this video is going to be touching on the world's view, all right, their mistaken view of a piece of this Israelite doctrine, all right, as we stated in the video before. If your understanding, if you think you have the understanding of the true Hebrew Israelite doctrine, all right, and that doesn't include the teaching of GMS, and it's not on the same line as GMS, you do not have the true meaning. All right, you do not have the true understanding of what Hebrew Israelite doctrine is. All right, we will tell you that it is, first of all, it is not our own. All right, it is of the Lord. All right, it is the Lord's word. This isn't our own. All right, and we know that this is a gift, so we take care of it as such. Okay, if you call the Hebrew Israelites black Hebrew Israelites, you're not on the same path, man. Okay, you do not have an understanding of what Hebrew Israelite doctrine is. All right, let me let me get this really quick, because this world likes to group everyone. All right, they want to talk about colorism, okay, but they like to group everything into colors. Okay, so just because you have one Hebrew Israelite group, all right, that is a melanated group, right? Melanated people, you group them together with all other Hebrew Israelite groups that are melanated just upon looking at them, okay? And you take what one says as what all says, right? The world is about colorism, okay? We do not teach or preach colorism. All right, first of all, Amos 3:3, can two walk together except they be agreed? Now let's get some other translations of this really quickly. Okay. NLT, can two people walk together without agreeing on the direction? No. All right. NIV, do two walk together unless they have agreed to do so? No. All right. ESV, do two walk together unless they have agreed to meet? No. All right. So you can see here the theme. You can't group people together, all right, because of color, all right, which is colorism, and think that they all say the same thing. All right, that is colorism in itself. All right, you have to pay attention to doctrine. This is not a black thing. This is most definitely an Israelite thing, though. All right. So if you don't pay attention to doctrine and you are about color, you will group us all into one lump and say we teach the same thing. All right. We may all be Israelites, all right, but let's get this really quick. Hold on a second. Hold on a minute. Let me find this verse while it's in my mind. on a second. Okay, let me see. Hold on quickly. Hold on a quick second. I gotta find this verse. All right, but speaking to the point while I'm looking for this, see if I can do two things at once. But that is a colorism move. All right, where you just group people that look alike into one group and say that this is the doctrine, that they all speak. All right, you have to listen to doctrine. All right, we give the example again of if there are identical twins walking down the street. All right, they walk alike, their gait is the same. Okay, the tone of their tone and pitch of their voice is the same. Their height is the same. They even say certain words at the same time. All right, their haircut is the same, clothing is the same. All right, how do you tell the difference? All right, you won't be able to tell the difference until you get to know those twins. All right, and then when you get to know them, it kind of skews your vision. All right, they start not looking as identical as you thought they did when you first put eyes on them. That is the importance of knowing the doctrine, not only to separate the 2/3 from the 1/3, but to separate Esau and Jacob. All right, their doctrines. Let me see. Okay, let's see something really quick. All right, hold on. Anyway, I can't find this verse right now. Let's see. This might be it though. Romans 9:6. Not as though the word of Yahweh Baal Shem Yahweh Shai hath taken none effect, for they are not all Israel which are of Israel. Meaning, all right, although certain people in these groups, all right, that teach off-brand doctrines, okay, that teach off doctrines that don't teach Yahweh Baal Hashem Yahweh Shai's doctrine, all right, although they may be Israelites, they are off in the spirit, all right, they may be of Israel in the flesh, All right, but when it comes to spiritually having the correct doctrine, they are not. But the world seems to use colorism to group us all into one group and then stamp, this is their doctrine on all of us. All right. Now, also, we teach also, all right, Deuteronomy 28 and 64. Let's get here. Deuteronomy 28 and 64. It says, "And the Lord Yahweh shall scatter thee among all people from the one end of the earth even unto the other. And there thou shalt serve other gods, which neither thou nor thy fathers have known, even wood and stone." So being scattered among all people from the one end of the earth even to the other. All right, we're going to be multiplying. All right, we're going to be planting seed there. All right, Israelite men begat Israelites. Okay, so among these nations, we would also multiply. All right, so we look like, walk like, talk like, and worship like all people, right? Which is a problem. I mean, as far as the worshiping part. And if you know what walking like, all right, their manner of life, okay? If you know that definition, then yeah, that part too. All right, talking like, all right, goes also back to teaching, all right, teaching the ways of the heathen, all right, in the spiritual sense. Okay, but looking like another nation, if that entails walking like, talking like, speaking like, then yes, that's going off too. But looking like, we're talking about physical here, so that's what this video is about. So looking like another nation isn't isn't a sin. Okay, it is exactly the position that we are put in right now. This is a condition of the battle. All right, so I say that to bring up some of the other nations' walks, what they may look like. Of course, I don't look like, um, uh, a so-called white person, a so-called Japanese person, a so-called Chinese person. Okay, any other so-called nation. All right, but their plight has to come to their path has to come to the Lord some way or another. They have to go through some kind of pushback. All right. Some people grew up in these other nations, all right, being born of an Israelite back in their lineage, to where their families were ashamed of it. All right, their families didn't like it, so it was hidden from them. All right, or maybe they don't like it or are ashamed of it, and so they don't bring it up. They don't admit to it because of one thing or another. Okay, because they were ashamed to be associated with the lowest of the nations. Okay, the world looks upon us as being very low, all right, in which we are. The Lord brought us to a low state, okay? But for instance, an Israelite that looks so-called white, all right, he may have to fight through thinking that he's so-called white. He may have to fight through, he on the daily he was using his privilege, all right? On the daily he walked about in the position of being so-called white, all right? Having certain benefits, or in certain parts of the nations, all right, even these other nations sometimes don't like so-called white people, all right. So maybe he put up with that, being in a community where he was the only so-called white person, but he always felt a connection towards um, these other races. He always felt a pull towards the Lord, especially in these days. All right, that might be a sign to come up out of your so-called white privilege, to stop being ashamed of your heritage if it was held back by your family or even yourself. Okay, all right. Don't let what you look like on the outer deter you from mending your relationship with the Lord through the spirit and power of the Lord. If you feel a pull towards this and you know the doctrine of the Lord, all right, the true doctrine of the Lord, all right, the true Hebrew Israelite doctrine, okay, and you agree with this, all right, you don't try to buck up against it, all right, don't let a man deter you from being close to Yahweh and Yahweh Shai, all right, and it starts with those names, okay, it starts with these names. All right, you cannot be ashamed in any part of the truth. All right, Matthew 11, uh, starting at the top, is the heading reads John's questions. All right, Matthew 11 and 1, it says, "And it came to pass when Yahushua had made an end of commanding his 12 disciples, he departed thence to teach and to preach in their cities." Now, what is he teaching and preaching? Just any old thing? No, he's about his Father's business. He is teaching and preaching the one true doctrine. There's only one. All right, there's only one. Let's get a verse pointing to that. All right, this is 2 John 1 and 10. "If there come any unto you and bring not this doctrine, receive him not into your house, neither bid him Godspeed." Again in Revelation 2 and 24, "But I say unto you and unto the rest of Thyatira, as many as have not this doctrine, and which have not known the depths of Satan, as they speak, I will put upon you none other burden." All right, let's go to another one really quick. All right, this is 1 Corinthians 1 and 10. "Now I beseech you, brethren, by the name of our Lord Yahushua HaMashiach, that ye all speak the same thing, and that there be no divisions among you, but that ye be perfectly joined together in the same mind and in the same judgment," pointing to one doctrine. All right, if you don't know the doctrine, okay, Satan's doctrine, which is inclusive of all people, all right, is going to get you. All right, it's going to take you. All right, the Lord did not mean for this to be for everyone. This is for Israel, and in these times, namely for the ones who are actually taking heed, which are the remnant and the elect. But if you are a so-called white-looking Israelite, all right, you have obstacles that you have to walk through. All right, put away that white privilege. All right, put away that racism, no matter what it stem from. And yes, we are nationalists. All right, we're not racist. You know, race is a form of control. All right, a category that the evil man, the wicked man, puts you in. All right, we are nations that are all here on this earth. Okay, people fit the traits and characteristics of the nations that were described in the scriptures, and that's what we are. We are not a color. Okay, the ones who take heed to doctrine know this. The world doesn't know this, so it likes to slap everybody into one group and put a name on them. All right, put one doctrine on them. Just as Christianity has many doctrines or many denominations, all right, there are Israelites out here that teach different things, man. Okay, it said back here in Deuteronomy 28:64, "The Lord shall scatter thee among all people, from the one end of the earth even unto the other." All right, remember the second part, "And there thou shalt serve other gods," plural, "which neither thou nor thy fathers have known, even wood and stone." There are so many doctrines over here, okay, that yes, even many Israelites have fell into. So it's important to pay attention to doctrine. But if you look like a so-called other nation that isn't particularly what the world calls black, all right, or Native American or Latino, right, that doesn't mean that you are not an Israelite. So even there's even a doctrine, all right, through Israelites, maybe Israelites, all right, that is a black power doctrine repackaged. Okay, repackaged in to looking holy, but it's not holy. It's a worldly thing. All right. All the tribes are not so-called blacks, man. Okay, they are not so-called black. Okay, they look like, talk like, walk like all other nations, and we are not Africans either. Okay, we are South West Asiatic. All right, Israel is that landmass anyway, which Israel is a people before it's a place. But Israel is not in Africa, man. All right, Africa is where we escaped to get away from or when we were scattered. All right, to get away from uh, bondage. Okay, we were scattered into the interiors of Africa, but we came out of right a different continent. Now, again, if you don't look so-called black, so-called Native American, so-called Latino, that doesn't mean that you are not an Israelite. Right? If the Spirit is pulling you in this direction, that may mean that you are, in fact, an Israelite, man. All right? And for you black only Israelites who may turn away someone for their looks, all right, because you are a colorism group. Here's a scripture for you. This is Matthew 18:6. It says, "But whoso shall offend one of these little ones which believe in me, it were better for him that a millstone were hanged about his neck, and that he were drowned in the depths of the sea." You could have an Israelite, all right. For instance, again, I have to use the example of Patrick Mahomes. Okay, what if his kids, all right, grow up, his boys grow up, marry again into uh, you know, another so-called white spouse, all right, white wife, all right, and this goes on for, and this world isn't going to be here for that long. I was going to mention generations and generations, but I'm bringing this up just as an example. All right, say his kids, Patrick Mahomes' kids, grows up, and again, his son takes to him a so-called white wife. All right, them kids are going to be even more looking so-called white, probably. All right. Knowing that his father is an Israelite, you should know that his grandchildren are Israelites. All right. Through his sons. Okay. So that grandchild of Mahomes comes to you who is an Israelite. He may not look like what you deem to be an Israelite on the outward because he's not black on the outward, but he is indeed an Israelite. He feels a pull towards the Lord. Okay, and you can use this example for any race, but it seems like the world is just infatuated with so-called white. All right, but you can use this for any so-called Israelite or any Israelite who looks like another so-called color. Okay, or people or another people. All right, but they come to you looking so-called white, so-called Asian, so-called Chinese, so-called Japanese. All right, they come to you. Okay, feeling a pull towards the Lord. They hear the word on the corner, right? They hear the word on the video, and they come to you in all sincerity and tell you that they want to learn more. Right? And we'll just use the example of coming to you on the street because we need to bring up the point when you look at them, you go by colorism. I'm speaking again to you Israelites that are about colorism. All right, you turn them away, right? Because you are judging with your eyes alone. All right, and that's why we read Matthew 18:6, because this is what you're doing. You're offending the little ones that actually believe sincerely in the word that they've heard. All right, what if they heard it on a video? What if they heard it through GMS on YouTube? Right, they heard this truth. It resonates with them truly and sincerely. Okay, all the way to their spirit, and they forget where they heard it. All right, they walk up a street, they see another group teaching and preaching, you know, and they walk over to you and they ask you about it because they really want to learn sincerely. The Lord has called these people to them, and they come to you. All right, and you are about colorism. All right, and you turn these people away. All right, you have offended a little one. All right, now that doesn't land on your shoulders alone, because that person has to fight through that. All right, the judgment for them was to grow up looking so-called whatever other nation, and they have to fight through being told that since they are melanated or don't look so-called melanated, that they are not an Israelite. So that's gonna tell how strong their faith is. Are they gonna stop there where they were offended by you, or is their walk going to keep continuing? All right, and that's all dependent. All of this is dependent upon the Lord anyway. All right, so again, for you black-only groups, Matthew 18:6, but whoso shall offend one of these little ones which believe in me, it were better for him that a millstone were hanged about his neck and that he were drowned in the depths of the sea. Okay, and for you Israelites that look like other nations, I wanted to finish reading this Matthew 11:1 through 6. It says, and it came to pass when Yahushua had made an end of commanding his 12 disciples, he departed thence to teach and to preach in their cities. All right, the one true doctrine. This is what he was going around saying. Okay, spreading the gospel. All right, bringing in those who were scattered. Matthew 11:2 says, now when John had heard in the prison the works of the Messiah, he sent 2 of his disciples and said unto him, art thou he that should come, or do we look for another? Now, they didn't go by looks only. They went by what he was going to say. All right, they asked him a question, waiting for a reply. And also, I wanted to bring up that the internet wasn't back then, right? And the word was spreading about this truth. All right, John heard about the works of the Messiah, Yahushua, while he was in prison. All right, and he got word to 2 of his disciples to go and look. Okay. Yahushua answered and said unto them, go and show John again those things which ye do hear and see. All right, they didn't judge with their eyes alone or their ears alone. All right, hear and see. All right, Matthew 11:5, it says, the blind receive their sight, the lame walk, the lepers are cleansed, the deaf hear, the dead are raised up, and the poor have the gospel preached to them. And this is a literal things that happened. The Lord was going around healing people, man. All right, curing people of their infirmities, whether it be blindness, all right, lameness, all right, leprosy, all right, death, being dead, all right, and preach the gospel to the poor. Okay, let's go in here and look at some of these words, because yes, this is literal, but also this is spiritual. Let's see, the blind. All right, let's look up this word for blind.
Strong's G 5185, to floss. To floss.
All right, it says blind.
Thayer's Lexicon, related entry, prosaites. Prosaites.
All right, outline of biblical usage for the word blind, or the Greek word we just used here. It says blind, mentally blind also, right? Mentally blind, all right, like people are in this day. You know, they judge by their eyes alone. They don't use their heart, which goes back to the word la'ab, which means your mind, all right? They're mentally blind. They were blocked before Yahweh spoke to them, all right, healed them. All right, Strong's definition, it says, i.e., by analogy, blind, physically or mentally blind. All right, and that's a big thing with the world today. Their mentals, all right, their mentals, their heart is all messed up and skewed by this world, being that it is mostly wicked. Okay, being that it is mostly wicked, these demons don't just sit still, man. They jump on the people. All right, but all things are accomplished because of the will of Yahweh and Yahweh Shai. All right, so let's go back here now. And Lord willing, this is coming through clear and as sincere and edifying. All right, I hope the point is coming through. But the Lord is going to make the point to the ones that it's meant for. All right. So again, Matthew 11:5, the blind receive their sight, and the lame walk. The lepers are cleansed, and the deaf hear. The dead are raised up. The poor have the gospel preached unto them. Okay. Now it says the lame walk. Let's go ahead and in here and see what lame is.
Strong's G 5560. Cholos. Cholos.
All right, it says lame, deprived of a foot, maimed. Most really in the spirit, all right, you're deprived of putting your best foot forward when it comes to walking towards this truth. It says, i.e., limping, cripple, halt, lame. Now, I want to go back here. And just to show that this is also speaking spiritually, let's look up the lame walk. Now, look at this word for walk. Here's the word.
Strong's G 4043. Peripateo. Peripateo.
All right, now listen to this outline of biblical usage. Yes, it says to walk, but then it says to make one's way, progress, to make due use of opportunities. All right. And this is what we are called to do now, man. All right, to stop being lame, to make use of your opportunities through this word. All right, through the preaching being preached to us hearing the truth, the one doctrine, no matter what we look like, to make due use of opportunities. In this time, in this grace period, it is the time, the opportune time to do the things that are pleasing unto the Lord. All right, you first have to accept this truth, though. Outline of biblical usage again. Number 2, it says Hebrew for to live. Okay, we was just talking about lame, all right, and walking, but it says Hebrew for to live. It says to regulate one's life, to conduct oneself, to pass one's life. All right, so if you are an Israelite and you look like another nation, you will come from among that nation in your mind, man, in your spirit. And you will walk towards the Lord in all truth and sincerity. All right, you will take hold to the true doctrine and you will push it throughout the earth, man. You will grow in it and you won't let anyone deter you. All right, just because of how you look on the outward part. All right, it is the message that matters. The true message, though, not just an off brand or an offshoot of the truth. All right, you eat the whole roll, you grow in spirit, you learn the truth of these things, and you regulate your life. You conduct yourself as such. All right, and you pass the rest of your time here walking in the truth. You endure to the end. All right, you make do the use of the opportunity that we find ourselves in, which is to walk in the ways of the Lord. All right. So you hear that the true doctrine tells you that this is not about colorism. It is about nationalism, though. Right? This is an Israelite thing, but Israelites come looking like all other nations. Right? You won't know this unless you take heed to the truth. You won't know it unless the Lord deems you worthy of knowing it. All right, let me get this verse really quickly here. All right, Jeremiah 12:9, it says, mine heritage is unto me as a speckled bird. The birds round about are against her. Come ye, assemble all the beasts of the field, come to devour. So regardless of what you look like, if you are an Israelite, you're going to go through things, man. The people around you are not for you. So maybe you've been taught to dislike your lineage on your father's side just because he was a so-called minority. All right. Which Israelites are not the minority. All right. It is the elect among all these nations that we were scattered amongst and multiplied amongst that are a minority. Okay. But Israelites as a whole, we are the majority. Okay. A lot of Israelites don't know that they're Israelites. They hold to being so-called Japanese or Chinese or, all right, East Indian or uh, Israeli, Jewish. All right. They hold to being so-called white. They don't even consider that they are the true people because it has been hid from them, whether through the people that they are surrounded by or the Lord maybe hid it from them. Okay. Or rather, they know it and refuse to admit it because, again, of stereotypes, of colorism. All right. They don't know the truth. If everyone knew the truth, if everyone knew the truth, if this was made for everyone, okay, and you know that there is a Almighty, you know His name is Yahweh. You know His Son's name is Yahweh Shai. Right? You know that you may not look like an Israelite, what the world says, black Hebrew Israelites. Right? You know you don't look like that, but you know the truth that you are. You would come out of the ways of thinking of the nation that you are amongst. All right, and they would hurt. They would hate you even more for it. All right? They try to deter you from knowing your history, or maybe you avoid it altogether on your own. But all right, a lot of people are going to come to know the truth. Everyone's going to come to know the truth. All right, and if you are an Israelite, you're going to be ashamed that you were ashamed of or offended by this truth, and that was going to be the point at the end of this. Let me get back here, Matthew 11. All right, hold on. It says, "And the deaf hear." All right, you went from being in the ways of these other nations, learning their ways, turning your ear away from the truth. All right, but something snagged you. Something caught you up, something pricked you, and you said, okay, this is the truth. All right, you were deaf and then you heard it. And the Lord called you back in if you are of the remnant and the elect. Okay, you didn't let someone tell you that since you don't look a certain way, you are not an Israelite. You are not an Israelite. All right, those people you moved past and you made it to the truth and you've landed here. The one and only true doctrine of the Lord. All right. It says the dead are raised up. And again, these are all literal, what the Lord did. All right. These are spiritual though in these times too, man. All right. The dead are raised up. When you walk in this place outside of the true doctrine, you are dead. You are as good as dead. Okay. If the Lord deems that you receive this though, if the Lord deems that you receive the truth, all right, you are raised up from being dead. Okay. And the mission is to endure in this. Okay, until He returns. It says, and the poor have the gospel preached to them. Okay, people who feel like they're low, or people who are actually low. They figure out why. They figure out about the curses. Okay, they figure out this is why. Their questions about life all start getting answered. This is why I could never make it. This is why I raised to a certain status and fell. All right, for me to be right here where I'm at now, learning the truth. Okay, and it's a good thing to have the gospel preach to you, man. Look, gospel, good news, man. Let's go in there and get that really quick. It says, have the gospel preached to them. Let's see. Actually, let's get the word for poor first.
Strong's G 4434. Tochas. Tochas.
All right, outline of biblical usage, reduced to beggary, begging, asking alms. It says destitute of wealth, influence, position, honor. All right, it says lowly, afflicted. All right, destitute of the Hamashiachium virtues and eternal riches, which is his truth. These things are eternal. All right, it says helpless, powerless to accomplish an end, poor, needy, lacking in anything. It says as respects their spirit, destitute of wealth, of learning, and intellectual culture which the schools afford, men of this class mostly readily give themselves up to the Messiah's teachings and prove themselves fitted to lay hold of the heavenly treasure, which was this truth, which is this truth. All right, so you may be low. This truth answered your life questions, and you are deemed worthy of taking hold of the heavenly treasure, which is the truth. All right, you grow in it, and then you, in turn, become someone who pushes this thing in the world. All right, and there is no higher office on this earth than to be a preacher and a teacher of the things that the Lord left for us to preach and teach. All right, that is the highest office on this earth, not anything else. There's nothing else higher. All right. Now I did skip a word. It says, "And the dead are raised." Let's get this word for dead.
Strong's G 3498. Nekras. Nekras.
Outline of biblical usage. It says, "One that has breathed his last," or lifeless. Okay. Deceased, departed, one whose soul is in heaven or hell, and there is no place where your soul burns forever. This is considered hell for Israelites. This place down here. All right, a lot of people don't even know that they are in hell, which is, man, that describes hell too, right there. It says destitute of life, without life, inanimate. There's also a spiritual side. That, yes, that does mean dead were raised. Like we said, the Lord literally raised people from the dead, but also this is a spiritual dead shall be raised. All right, outline of biblical uses. 2, it says metaphor, spiritually dead. Destitute of a life that recognizes and is devoted to Yahweh and Yahushai, because given up to trespasses and sins. Now you are dead. You're walking outside of the truth, man. It says inactive as respects to doing right. You are dead if you are outside of doing right. Again, how do you measure what right and wrong is? You filter it through the scriptures. You don't go by your emotions, okay? Your feelings, your opinions. You filter everything through the scriptures, and you get active as respects to doing right. It says destitute of force or power, inactive or inoperative. If you are doing nothing, If you think faith is just speaking that you have faith, that's not faith. All right. Faith includes works. What are those works? All right. These questions are important. All right. You have to get that foot back. You have to stop from being lame. All right. Stop from being lame. What did it say? Lame. Let me see. It says deprived of a foot. All right. You want to quit being lame, man. And you want to walk. Let's get that again. To make one's way, progress, to make due use of opportunities. And again, this grace period is the greatest opportunity we find ourselves in today. All right. This is what the Lord sent his son to die for. All right. For us to take advantage of this grace period, to have those penalties postponed. Okay. In order that we are able to walk in his ways to the best of our ability. Otherwise, we'd all be dead. All right. Let me get this next verse though. All right. That was Matthew 11:5. All right. Matthew 11:6 now says, and blessed is he whosoever shall not be offended in me. Which means you need to take in this truth for what it is. You don't take away from it. You don't add to it to suit you. You don't take away from it. You don't add to it to suit the ones that are around you that you don't want to offend. You'd rather not offend them and offend the Lord. That's the walk that most of the world is in. They're afraid to offend people. Right? They're not afraid to offend the Lord, man. That's way off. That's way off. Right? But that is the wicked spirit of this place. All right? It says, and blessed is he whosoever shall not be offended in me. All right, let me look up that really quick. What is this word offended?
Strong's G 4624. Scandalizo. Scandalizo.
All right. It says to be displeased, indignant, to make indignant, to cause one displeasure at a thing. Okay? Since one who stumbles or whose foot gets entangled feels annoyed. All right? You stop being lame, you get that good foot, you start progressing in your opportunities, and you smack into an offense. All right? Someone tells you that because you don't look a certain way, you're not an Israelite. So guess what you do? You stumble because you got offended or annoyed. All right? You need to push past that. First of all, you need to recognize that that is not true doctrine. Okay? Israelites come in the form of, or look like all other nations. We were scattered into all nations, so we look like all nations. But that's not the only thing that you can get entangled by, man. All right? Quit eating everything because this world tells you that you are at liberty to eat everything. All right? Quit eating all this bullshit, man. Swine gotta go. Shrimp, crab, lobster has to go. There are many more foods too, man. You have to look. Go and look at these things. Okay, these are things that people can help. All right? Grow a beard. Quit shaving your head. Don't grow your hair past your shoulders, man. Okay? But people get offended in that. They want to hold on to whatever part of this world they can hold on to. So they get offended in the truth, man. And it causes them to stumble. Okay? Because they get annoyed or offended. Okay? It says to be offended in one, i.e., to see in another what I disapprove of and what hinders me from acknowledging his authority. to cause one to judge unfavorably or unjustly of another. Again, according to who? According to the Lord. We don't judge according to our emotions, our feelings. Okay, these are the words of the Lord. See, this is the doctrine, the true Hebrew Israelite doctrine over here. Okay. So let's see what. Let's have Google define offended.
Offended.
It says offended, resentful, or annoyed, typically as a result of a perceived insult. Okay. It says offend as a verb also. It says cause to feel upset, annoyed, or resentful. Be displeasing to. All right. And the Lord says, blessed are those who are not offended in me. Matthew 11:6, and blessed is he whosoever shall not be offended in me. And what is Yahushua? Isn't he the word made flesh? All right. So I just wanted to speak on that a little bit. I don't even know what I'm gonna call this. I hope this came through as sincere and edifying, that it wasn't too much of a video sounding just like a rant. All right. I just wanted to go in on, people that are really about colorism, accusing us of being about colorism, but that's what the devil does, man. He puts a battery in people's back. Right? He puts a lot of false doctrine, feeds you every day with false doctrine. Feeds you every day with pride. Right? Things that will make this doctrine seem offensive. All right, but this is the word of the Lord. This is how everybody should be walking. All right, this is how we recommend everyone to be walking, but it's not meant for everyone. All right, but we are to explain these things when we learn them. Okay, so once again, we don't preach colorism. All right, did I even read that? Okay, that read that speckled bird. Okay, so this is not a black thing again. This is an Israelite thing. All right, and even with the colorism thing being said, the bulk of the Israelites landed in the so-called blacks, so-called Native Americans, and the so-called Latinos. Okay, but that does not mean that in this day there aren't so-called white-looking Israelites. You cannot judge by your eyes alone. You can't even judge by your ears alone. These people done pushed whatever they wanted to push by sounding like they are of Yahweh Bahashim Yahushai, by sounding like they are of who the world ignorantly calls God. Okay? But if you go by your ears alone and you don't see their actions, you're missing. You're missing a lot. Right? You're missing the proof. Okay? Also, the other way around. If you go by judging your eyes alone, all right, you're missing the proof. You're missing the point, period. Okay? That's why it is said multiple times in the scriptures, eyes to see, ears to hear. All right? So, I think that's it. I'm going to stop it right there. But I hope that came through as sincere and edifying once again. And with that, all praise to Yahweh, in the name of his son, Yahweh Shai, in the name of the Holy Spirit. Double honors to my elders, apostles, and the bishops of Great Millstone, also known as GMS, and the prophets of doom. And these are where I have learned this truth, and these are where I am still learning this truth. And also shalom to the remnant and the elect of Israel. Lord willing, I'm of that number. And Lord willing, we'll see you in the next video. Shalom.